Okay, so hello, evening, good day, good morning, afternoon, wherever you're watching in the world. We've hit 700 subscribers, so this is a special live stream. Obviously, we had the FA Cup third round over the weekend here in England, and I watched the Liverpool Everton game and a little bit of the Arsenal Leeds game. Really interesting things to note from this FA Cup weekend we just had. Crowd numbers are down on last year by around 150,000 spectators over the whole FA Cup third round weekend. We're obviously not including the Arsenal game last night. Now, that is concerning. Numbers last year were down on the year before and the year before that. So there has been a decline in fans going to games for about 3 or 4 years now. And it's been very markedly obvious this weekend. If you look at the Cardiff Carlisle game, for example, only about 5,000 fans turned up at the Cardiff City Stadium. That is striking. Now, that wasn't a live televised game, but that is still massively striking. So that's a cause of concern, obviously, for the FA, that fans are staying away. There could be a multitude of reasons for this. There could be many reasons for this. So I'll be interested to know if you went to any games or if you watched any games on the TV, on BT Sport or on the BBC. About if you went to a game, were you surprised by the amount of empty seats? That's really interesting to know. Hello, DJ. Welcome to the stream. Get your questions ready for whatever sport you're interested in. That's a really interesting development. Is the numbers going to FA Cup games this weekend, just gone in the third round, are down on last year, which was down on the year before, which was down on the year before that. And last season, I did notice a lot of games with a lot of empty seats, including replays. And from the third round onwards, a lot of empty seats at the Premier League and Championship clubs that were at home. Swansea was a prime example where there was a lot of empty seats at Swansea games in the FA Cup. Really striking. Now, they were relegated, obviously, last season, but it was a striking development seeing how many empty seats there were. Now, looking at, things, could it be ticket price? Could it be travel problems? These are things that the FA needs to look at. Too many televised games, let's say on BT Sport or the BBC, that could be something that's making people want to stay at home. It wasn't actually that bad weather conditions this weekend. The weather conditions, it's January. They're not going to be toasty and warm, but the conditions weren't that bad at the weekend. So that's an interesting point to look at, is the numbers being down. And this is an ongoing trend. So it'll be interesting to see with the replays that we have coming up what the crowd numbers are like and how many empty seats are at the FA Cup replays in the third round in the next week or so, and then what the fourth round is like as well, how many empty seats are at games, because the Premier League clubs and the Championship clubs that have money doesn't necessarily hurt them, but some of those clubs that are heavily reliant on cup runs or cup games to increase their revenues, it's going to hurt them, especially the League One, League Two and non-league clubs. That's really going to hurt revenues. That's really interesting to look at. Ticket price has been a bone of contention for a lot of fans for quite some time. With the price of tickets, especially when you have a short turnaround in between games, especially cup games where you're not sure if your team's going to get through to the next round. When your team gets through and put it into the hat and gets through to the next round, you want to get your tickets. So it's an interesting one. In the NHL, Peter Laviolette has been fired by the Nashville Predators yesterday evening, early this morning. And Hines, the former New Jersey Devils coach, has been named his replacement very, very quickly. So I'm assuming that was in the pipeline for a while. And David Poyle, he's the only GM the Nashville Predators have ever known. They've only ever had two coaches, Barry Trotz being the other previous coach. So that was, a surprise. Nashville have been struggling this season, but that was a surprise. So, you were at the Preston North End versus Norwich City game, and you weren't surprised by the amount of empty seats. Now, that's interesting. Someone went to a game and they weren't surprised with empty seats. That really does surprise me. Preston, have a very passionate fan base. Norwich always seem to travel well, so I'm really surprised that Preston North End versus Norwich, there were empty seats in the third round of the Cup. Now, I know Norwich are obviously battling relegation this season from the Premier League. They are struggling at the wrong end of the table. But you would think a day out in the Cup might attract a good solid away following there. Really surprised. Honestly surprised. The most striking one is the Cardiff City Carlisle game. Now, I know it's only Cardiff City Carlisle, but you would think if that was Cardiff City versus Swansea or Cardiff City Newport or Cardiff City Wrexham, the crowd numbers would be higher. That's an interesting one. So I'm interested that someone went to a game and they weren't surprised with empty seats. I would be interested to know how much it cost for a ticket. And what would the expected attendance was going to be, because away fans make up a huge proportion of attendance at games. And Leeds took 9,000 down to the Emirates last night. 9,000 Leeds fans, had tickets, and many more did travel down to London, for the evening. So Leeds travelled well, and the Emirates, was pretty full. Anfield, Liverpool, Everton, not surprising that was a sellout because, they're separated by Stanley Park, and Liverpool is a football mad city. But I am surprised with a lot of the empty seats. I'm very sorry to hear that. To be fair, this time 10 years ago, my dad passed away, so I understand completely, where you're coming from there. That's not nice news to hear at this time of year. That is my condolences to you. In 3 days' time, it's been 10 years since my father passed away, so I know exactly how you feel. And it was actually exactly 10 years ago to the day that he had his first heart attack out of 6. So in 3 days. I completely understand where you're coming from, and that is not news you want to hear in the new year. So Millwall versus Newport was empty as well. See, this is something that the media doesn't want to talk about, but it was in the newspapers and it was on the BBC Sport website that crowd numbers were down, and it's something I have noticed. I've noticed this a lot. This is not just this year, last season and the season before. The FA Cup games I watched on the TV, there were a lot of empty seats. Even Millwall versus Everton last season, there were empty seats at the Den. So, that is really surprising that clubs like Newport and Millwall that had, great cup runs, oh, hello, Jason from work. Oh, yes, this is my charge hand from work, Jason. He's a Leeds fan. Yeah, Leeds travelled really well. So some of the 2 televised games on the BBC were really well supported. Liverpool, Everton and Leeds Arsenal. Really sellout crowds. Atmosphere brilliant. Both games were played in the right spirit. There wasn't lots of gnarliness behind the games. Fans in good voice. 9,000 Leeds fans did get tickets for the Emirates last night, and the Emirates was packed. But yeah, no, Millwall versus Newport, Preston North End, Norwich, Cardiff, Carlisle. These are 3 games that have been highlighted, especially the Cardiff game. Only about 5,000 fans turned up, and that is really, really stunning. That a team like Cardiff that has been to the FA Cup final, a team like Cardiff that's got a very passionate fan base, really passionate fan base down in South Wales. Can't get enough fans in the stadium. Partly possibly because it was that we're only playing Carlisle. They're in a different league to us. It's a cup. But I'm surprised. But could there be economics behind this? Is the ticket price too high? Is there too little time between the second and third rounds for fans to buy tickets from the lower league clubs to the bigger clubs? What's the ticket package that the Championship and Premier League clubs are giving away for cup games? Like, what are they pricing it at? Is it the same as a league game? Does it come under the season ticket? These are all really interesting questions that the clubs have to answer, and the FA. And it'll be interesting to see if the 4th round there is as many empty seats as there are in the 3rd round. Bear in mind that you got actual attendance versus paid attendance. So the actual attendance are those actually at the ground, and paid attendance is those with season tickets and box tickets. Right? They've paid for the tickets, but don't actually show up, and that's again where there's a variation. But actual fans in the ground, actual attendance in the ground, it was very strikingly obvious. Looking at a lot of the figures released, crowd numbers are down, and down on averages as well. So really striking. Also, we've had the Super League pre-season has started. It starts a good 2 months earlier than the NRL, which I find really interesting. James Maloney's gone over to Catalan. Sonny Bill Williams signed for Toronto. So these are big name players who played State of Origin and played International Rugby League and won the grand final in the NRL, coming over, to Super League. We've already got Blake Austin. Ben Barber's graced the Super League and got fired from the Super League, but that's another thing entirely. And also fired from the NRL for being a grub. So some big name players from the NRL coming over and playing in Super League. Interesting to note, salary cap. And interesting to note, Rugby League doesn't have the money that it used to. There are money issues within Rugby League, both in the Super League and the NRL. So it's going to be really interesting to see Toronto with their big wage bill. Sonny Bill Williams signing this massive contract at his age as well. One injury could really hammer the club financially, because he's a big risk financially. This is the thing. You have paid attendance versus actual attendance. Actual attendance, though, people actually turn up to the game. Paid attendance covers season tickets, those who bought a ticket package, the box seats, the corporates. Corporations will give away tickets to their staff. Okay, we've had gifts from work. So work gifts where a company might reward its staff with a bonus saying, okay, here's 5 tickets for the FA Cup semi-final, the FA Cup final. We saw this with the Challenge Cup final as well, with the second lowest attendance. Last year's been the lowest attendance when Catalan won, and obviously this season just gone, been the second lowest attendance since the Second World War. There's a lot of corporate tickets that don't get taken up. So they've been sold, they don't get taken up. So attendance at games is a thing. And with the TV rights coming into question and being up for renewal with Sky and BT Sport and things like that, really interesting to see where we go. I haven't followed too many of the signings in the Super League. We are in pre-season. The league does start in February. It'd be interesting to see how the World Club Challenge goes this year, considering that the NRL clubs have got the upper hand in recent seasons and are dominating quite convincingly over the Super League clubs. There is no question that it's not even close. The NRL season starts a good month after the Super League. We have the Auckland Nines. I still think, as it's pre-season, injuries can occur. There's been a lot of stuff on Twitter and Facebook about all these signings of players in the Super League and the Championship, and some big name players are going places. I think Toronto with Sonny Bill Williams, I think is the biggest signing in Super League. Although James Maloney going to Catalan, that was announced towards the end of last season that he was leaving the NRL and the Penrith Panthers. It wasn't working at Penrith with him, really. You could see it wasn't the same as him at Cronulla, for example, or him at the Roosters with James Maloney. That's an interesting one. But Sonny Bill Williams, what position do you play him in? How did Toronto play him? Do they play him as an interchange forward, like he was playing at the Roosters and Canterbury, or do you play him in the back line as a centre, where he's basically been with the All Blacks and in Super Rugby for the last 8 years? Where do you play Sonny Bill Williams? What's his best position? I would think keeping on the field for 80 minutes, being an attack runner with ball in hand in the back line, would serve Toronto far better than having him as an interchange forward. I think it really would serve Toronto better having him on the field for 80 minutes rather than in bursts of 20 or 40 minutes. Gareth Widdop, yes, but he has had repeat shoulder injuries. So when he was at the Dragons last season, he missed half a season with a dislocated shoulder. So the fact that Gareth Widdop has never played in Super League, that's a first. He's played in the NRL. His entire career has been played in the NRL. I'll be concerned about his shoulder injuries and the fact they are recurring injuries with those shoulders. He keeps having issues dislocating his shoulders. I'll be concerned if Warrington are relying heavily on him in the halves. If he goes down injured, that could be a big blow to them and their chances. I really do believe that. I think the fact that he's had so many shoulder injuries and he missed half of last season, I would be concerned about his fitness. Also, if the Pakistan playing in Dubai and the low turnout there makes you wonder why you're watching it. There's a reason why Pakistan were playing test matches and T20s and one days in Dubai. Security risks, obviously, in Pakistan, amongst a whole host of other issues with the Pakistan cricket team. But it does make you wonder why you're there, why you're watching it, why the team's playing there, what the ticket price is, a whole variety of things. Cricket is played in Dubai. There is a big Asian subcontinent, so that's India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Sri Lankan community over in Dubai and Qatar and those Gulf states. So cricket is played quite widely in Dubai. They do have a T20 team. They do play cricket in Dubai. There are cricket clubs. But it does make you wonder why, crowds are so low. But Test cricket's having a lot of issues across the board with crowd numbers. I think the day-night Test is the way to go for me. That's my personal opinion. If you want to save Test cricket, Rugby D, thank you very much for popping in very, very quickly. We're not staying on a long live stream this evening. I think an hour or so would suffice. But I'm interested to hear your questions, because it's all well and good me, waffling on about stuff, but you guys provide me with questions that I give my answers to. I can't give enough answers on the Warrington signings, or any signings really. The big ones, Maloney, Widdop, and Sonny Bill Williams, they're the real interesting ones to really talk about, because they're all NRL superstars. And bearing in mind, Sonny Bill Williams hasn't played rugby league for nearly a decade. So him coming back into the sport, what's his best position? Centre or forward? I would personally put him in the centres. I think he'd be far more destructive in the centres, ball in hand, running the ball with his handling skills and his physicality, than in the forwards. I think having a guy that size in the centres with that skill set would be terrifying for a Super League defence. But it's also a massive, expensive gamble. It could be an expensive success for Toronto or an expensive failure if he gets injured. And this is a big thing. With the amount of money he's on, that's a worry. Leeds United going back to the Premier League this season. We've still got half the season left to go. And I would think anything can happen. They don't have to worry about the FA Cup now. That's less fixture congestion, so that's a positive. But you look at the Championship table, and around the playoff places, there's not a lot of points covering a lot of teams. It's very congested. And as a Blackburn fan, I can tell you now that it's very congested in the playoff places going down to mid-table. There's not a lot of points covering a lot of teams. Goal difference is going to prove crucial. Injuries as well, and squad rotation. It's a difficult one. They came close last year and fell short. I think they have. I think the squad to do it. They were very competitive against Arsenal last night and played very well. Leeds is a club that's lacked stability since they were relegated from the Premier League all those years ago. In 2003, I think they got relegated from the Premier League. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Leeds United. If they fail this season, then Bielsa, I think, is out of a job. But I think they have to get promotion this season. But if they do, while they were very competitive in a one-off match against Arsenal, so a solid Premier League side, how would they survive? I mean, Norwich started the season really well. They've fallen off a cliff and they're in the relegation zone. Sheffield United, expected to be in the relegation zone, are doing pretty well in the league. So it's an interesting one. It's possible. There's still a long way to go this season. And we've seen the Championship is a very hard league to get out of, but it's a very easy league to get stuck in and get trapped in. But we'll see what happens with the rest of the transfer market for the next 3 weeks. Injuries and form. I think if they get through the rest of January and into February on winning, I say the next 10 games, winning 7, they put themselves in a very, very good position to get automatic promotion. Absolutely. Welsh professional rugby teams are hopeless. Is it time for one of them to be scrapped? We had this debate before the World Cup. At the end of last season, they were trying to merge the Scarlets and the Ospreys together, and that really was a disastrous idea by the Welsh Rugby Union. They've tried setting up a new team before with the Celtic Warriors. That failed after a season. Since professionalism has come into rugby union, the Welsh club game has been a disaster, regardless of however many teams you have. And then the Welsh Premiership is not of the highest standard anymore. There is an issue with Welsh rugby union and rugby league. In fact, rugby in Wales at club level is a disaster, regardless of which code you're looking at. How then the international team, the test side, have been so successful is beyond me. They have some really talented players. There is no doubt on that. But I think the selection rules, where you have to have a certain amount of caps before you can play overseas, I think are causing a problem with the centralised contracts. They need to look at that. And they need to look at the fact that they dropped the place names from the 4 provinces. They're just Scarlets, Dragons, Blues, and Ospreys. They've lost that kind of place name, which I think was part of the draw. And attendances at Welsh club level were crap. Welsh fans seem to turn up for the test matches for the national side. They don't seem to want to support their club sides, really. But the fact that the Welsh Rugby Union basically owns Newport Gwent Dragons tells you all you need to know about the situation that Welsh Rugby Union at club level finds itself. Players were going to the World Cup not sure if they were going to have a club to return to. That's the situation Welsh Rugby found itself 6 months ago. Players were not sure what was going to happen post-World Cup. Now, assurances have been made that all four teams will continue as they are. The issue is the centralised contracts. I think you have to allow the best players to play at the best clubs. You have to allow the best Welsh players, if they want to play in England or France, they have to be allowed to play in England or France, or if they want to go to Super Rugby or even Major League Rugby. If they're a younger player and they're not getting, they have an uncertain future. Major League Rugby is expanding. 3 more teams, kick off their campaigns in a month's time. And if the current trend continues with the instability at Welsh provincial level, they're going to lose young Welsh players over to Major League Rugby in the US, to the English club game, to the French club game, and possibly to Super Rugby as well. they could bleed talent. And then with the current selection rules, that means you have a smaller talent pool to choose from for the test team. And there's a big debate about, should they change the selection rules so the Welsh players can play whatever club they want to play at. I think that's the best. If rugby union is to survive, I think that's the way it's got to go. It's the best. The players should be able to choose where and what clubs they play for, rather than if they want to play international rugby union. You don't see football having this rule where you have to play domestically to be selected for your country. You don't have that rule. Rugby union, you seem to have that rule, and I think that's a bizarre rule that I think hinders the game. With some countries, only some countries does it hinder them. Other countries it doesn't, because you have the talent level there. I know England as well have brought in that rule. France have started selecting all from France. I think it can hinder some countries that have a smaller playing base or smaller financial base to work off. Yes, Ireland getting test status is a big thing. I think it'd be nice to see them play more test matches. But I think it's a boost that Test cricket needs as a new nation. And them and the Afghans are both now Test nations. I think that's a real positive. And Ireland did show last summer that they can compete against established Test sides and give them a game. Really give them a game. Admittedly, there were 4-day Test matches, but it's irrelevant if it's a 4 or 5 day Test. The Irish proved they can give England and Pakistan a real run for their money in Test cricket. I haven't been watching the under-20s ice hockey team, although I've had some friends play for GB under-20s in over the years, and do rather well out of it. I haven't really watched much ice hockey this season at Bracknell and things like that because I've moved. I just haven't had the time or the money to really watch as many games as I would like. But I will be looking forward to the World Championships in Switzerland. I will be looking forward to seeing the GB Canada game in the warm up. I'll be really looking forward to seeing how that game pans out. So I'm really looking forward to the senior side playing up in the World Championships in Switzerland in the spring, early summer. That's going to be really interesting. Second consecutive year at the top table. I think the team will be much the same as what it was last year. And they weren't embarrassed at any point. I mean, these are all professional players. They weren't embarrassed. There's clearly a gap in class between the Elite League and some of the other European leagues. Absolutely. I think that gap's closing. I think we're going to see more and more kids playing the game or wanting to play the game. We're going to see a growth in player base. We've already seen a growth in player base locally anyway, with Bracknell now having 3 senior teams. So I think the sport of ice hockey is growing in the UK again, which is a real positive. It was in the decline for so many years. So with the TV deal that the Elite League has, and with the growth of the game at grassroots level, with more kids playing the game, more kids watching the game, I think long term, yes, I think GB are going to have some exciting players going forward, and some exciting times. It'll be interesting to see how they compete at this year's World Championships as well. But I'm excited to see it. If we can win a game or two, I think that would be a real positive growth, and building on last year. Can Bradley Datt play in the Premier League? Well, he's injured at the moment. He's out for the rest of the season. He's a serious knee injury. We'll have to wait and see. There's been some real good finds from the lower leagues in the past that have gone and stepped up to the Premier League. I mean, look, Jamie Vardy, Grant Holt, Ricky Lambert. There's 3 players who played non-league and league football and scored in all 3 divisions, all the professional divisions plus the non-league. And Jamie Vardy's a prime example of good work ethic and good drive and good energy. Can take you a long way. He's also pretty good what he does skill wise. There's a lot of good players who play in the non-league and lower leagues who I think have been overlooked at academies or let go by Premier League teams when they were youngsters and not been given a chance. I mean, Ricky Lambert was told he would never play professional football when he was let go by Liverpool Academy when he was 15. He ended up playing for Liverpool right at the end of his career. So yes, I think he can play in the Premier League, but we have to see how he recovers from his knee injury. He's out for the rest of the season. It's a big blow for Blackburn and our promotion chances. But at the same time, Alan Shearer had a bad injury before we won the Premier League. And then he went on to be the Premier League's top goal scorer. So who can say, is a player going to make it in the Premier League or not? We've seen a lot of players be flash in the pans. Jesse Lingard hasn't scored or created an assist for 12 months. And he was an up-and-coming youngster, and he's really, really fallen flat the last 12 months. I think the last time he was scored was at the World Cup in 2018. So it's all well. I think work ethic goes a long way. And when you're a striker like Bradley Dack, it's also about positioning in the box. If you can position yourself in the box, and he's bearing in mind he's played in League One as well, and he's proven that he can play in the Championship. So I think he's a hungry player. I think he's got a good sense of where to position himself in the box and around the box, for scoring chances or creating chances for other players as well, because he can do that. So I think he can play in the Premier League, but I think first and foremost he has to recover from that knee injury. And this could be a career-threatening one. Knee injuries are hideous things to recover from, and they can take longer to heal than you expect. Maybe you can heal quicker than you expect, but knee injuries are a pain in the arse to recover from. I should know. I've had a few, and having seen so many players in so many sports have knee injuries and then have repeat injuries on the same knee as well, and it does hamper a player's career and the amount of games he or she can play. The other night for Liverpool, Oxlade-Chamberlain made his comeback, but James Milner went off injured. So injuries seem to be becoming more prevalent, and some clubs seem to suffer from them more than others. Arsenal are well known to have an injury treatment table, the treatment room full. West Ham seem to have a lot of injuries as well. Some clubs seem to be more prone to injuries than others. So it's an open-ended question with Bradley Dack. I think how he recovers from the knee injury and the rehabilitation, I think, will go a long way in saying if Blackburn do get promoted, how effective he will be in the Premier League. It's a different style of football to the Championship. It's a faster paced game than the Championship, a little bit less physical than the Championship maybe, but a faster paced game. And when you're coming back from a knee injury, that change in pace can be a big thing. But we'll see what happens. I think the Premier League is a far more competitive league now than what it was when Man United were dominating in the 90s. I think more teams can be a solid Premier League side. Look at Sheffield United, what they've done in their first season. They're not getting relegated, Sheffield United. Norwich, however, started the season really brightly and they faded pretty quick. And they're struggling for points right now. So when a team gets promoted and when players who have never played at this level approach it, they could really take to it like a duck to water, or they could really struggle like a fish out of water. It's one of them. But when you got a player out injured for the length of time he's out injured for, and the prognosis and the length of time, it's who can tell. But I'll be interested to see how a lot of the Blackburn players would adapt to the Premier League. Not just Bradley Dack, I think the whole squad. I think there needs to be a bit more added to the team. I think the team isn't quite there yet. While we're on the edge of the playoffs and we're there or thereabouts, we've had a good run of form to get us into the playoff contention. I still think there needs to be some additions made to the squad, and the squad strengthened for the team to be competitive enough to not just survive but actually stabilise in the Premier League and be back to where the team I think deserves to be. It's been a tough decade or so to be a Blackburn fan, I will admit that. It's been a real tough decade, but the ownership hasn't helped either. We've had some very bizarre ownership decisions and bizarre management decisions. Having Tony Mowbray in charge, I think, has stabilised the situation, and our league form has improved, and we got out of the League One and we stabilised in the Championship and survived in the Championship, and we're looking like we could get out of the Championship. But the Championship's a cutthroat league. We've discussed Leeds United going back to the Premier League. Again, I think they would have to make one or two transfers to really strengthen that squad. While they were competitive against Arsenal over 90 minutes at the Emirates in the FA Cup, that's a one-off game. It's a knockout game, winner takes all. If you get a draw, you go back to Ellen Road. But Leeds have been out of the Premier League for so long. Are they ready for the Premier League? They've been out of the Premier League for such a long time. It'll be. I don't know if some of these Championship teams they go all in to get out of the Championship, and then they don't really have enough to survive in the Premier League. It's one of them, but it's an open-ended question. Can he play? Absolutely. Will he be fit enough? Will the team actually get to the Premier League? That's another question. And will he stay a Blackburn player? He's going to miss half the season. Therefore, he's very likely to stay a Blackburn player because obviously the the rehabilitation and a knee injury, that's going to put some scouts off going, okay, this guy's had a serious knee injury. We won't, put an offer in for him. Who wants to put in a transfer for a player who may not recover in time to start the next season? There's an answer for you on that one. But it's an interesting question. I think the Premier League itself, I think the quality level of football is lesser now than what it was 10, 15 years ago as well. That's a personal opinion. And it harks back to the crowd numbers now, 10, 15 years ago, 7 million bought you a really, really good player. Now it gets you an average squad player. So the overinflation of the transfer market and other issues, it's an interesting one. But we'll see what happens. You can't predict what's going to happen 6, 9, 10 months down the line. You just can't. There's still a long way to go this season for a lot of clubs. There's a long way to go. It's a long season ahead. We're just past, the festive period, all that build-up of games. A lot of clubs are dealing with injuries, so it's going to be interesting to see where teams end up. And the debate about should we have a winter break earlier? Do we scrap the festive games? We used to play games on Christmas Day until about, I think, 1963. So the Boxing Day fixtures aren't a new thing, but they're not actually originally a traditional thing. There used to be games played, on Christmas Day until the early to mid 60s. So it's a later addition to the playing calendar, but it's interesting. I think fixture congestion is another thing that is regularly debated in football. Other sports are trying to limit the amount of games their players play. Like rugby union is trying to limit the amount of games a season that can be played by players for player welfare reasons. But ice hockey in the NHL, you play an 82 game regular season plus a minimum of 16 games in the playoffs. So if you sweep all 4 rounds 4-0 and get to the Stanley Cup and win the Stanley Cup in 16 games, it's doable. It's never been done. You're averaging around 20, 25 games in the playoffs on top of an 82 game season. So if you go the whole season uninjured and not healthy scratch, you go through the whole playoffs, you're playing over 100 games, 110 games a season. So the debate about player welfare and rotating players and things like that, it's an interesting one. And this is where injuries come from. It's a player welfare thing as well, allowing players to recover from injuries rather than rushing them back. We've seen so many times in football and rugby and ice hockey, players rushing back from injury just to get injured again, not that long after. There's a whole, who's your favourite English team in what sport? Because there's a lot of sports that we could discuss my favourite English teams in. If it's rugby union, it's Exeter Chiefs. I don't have a rugby league team that I really follow. I'm technically London Broncos is my local. Ice hockey. I'm wearing the Bracknell Bees hoodie for a reason because, it's my team. I've been following them since 1991. Although I know someone who plays for the Nottingham Panthers. I work locally, not too far from where the Guildford Flames play. I've got friends who've played for Slough and played for Basingstoke. So in various teams in their setup. I've got subscribers who follow Swindon. I've got subscribers who are fans of all sorts of teams all over the country. When it comes to football, I'm a Blackburn fan in this country. Rugby league, it would have to be the Broncos because they're my local team, but I don't really actually have a rugby league team in this country that I support. I just love the sport. I love being a neutral, watching a lot of games. Although I'm a Canberra Raiders fan if it comes to rugby league, which is obviously the NRL. Ice hockey, I have a few teams that I follow. Obviously the Bracknell Bees. I follow the Winnipeg Jets, the main team I support, and the Arizona Coyotes. So that's my NHL team sorted. Rugby union, I'm an Exeter Chiefs fan. The Sheffield Steel Dogs, I like to call them the Goon Squad. They're not as bad as they used to be for goonery, but they had a track record of being the Goon Squad for a while. Tongue in cheek. I've seen the Steel Dogs play a few times. Always feisty affairs. Very physical team. They play a certain style in a certain way. It's evolved a little bit. There's a bit more skill now. And of course, Liam Kirk used to play for the Steel Dogs back in the day. Our NHL draft pick with the Coyotes. I think, yeah, the whole Pirates. I've seen them play when they first came to existence about 4 or 5 years ago. They weren't a very good team, and they've become a very good team very, very quickly. But when I've noticed teams that tend to be at the bottom of the league, I've looked at the league table, and teams at the bottom have higher penalty minutes than teams at the top. Discipline is a big thing in winning games. Looking at the penalty minutes that teams take, the least disciplined teams seem to be at the bottom of the league this season. There's a few exceptions. Penalty minutes. If you look at the league table, right now near the bottom, bad with penalty minutes. Sheffield, bad with penalty minutes. I think Milton Keynes, bad with penalty minutes. The Leeds Chiefs, they're a new team. They've been cobbled together. They're not expected to do much. Actually pretty bad with penalty minutes as well. The London Raiders, Romford Raiders, the Raiders, really bad for penalty minutes. Whereas Telford and Peterborough, not so bad. They take less penalties. I think that's a big part of how a team's play. If a team is not happy and is not winning games, they're taking penalties. They're getting frustrated. They're giving away, power plays, and they're on the penalty kill and are conceding goals because they're a man down. They're frustrated. And you can tell. You can tell when a team is struggling or is ill disciplined. Penalty minutes, and in ice hockey, that's a killer. If you're killing more penalties than you're winning, and you're based on the penalty kill a lot. I do have a Twitter. Yes, I do have a Twitter. I'm not on there as much as I used to be. Since I've moved, I've been on Twitter a lot less. It's exactly the same as the channel name, the Sports Buffin. I'm on Twitter. I'm not on there as much as I used to be, although I link all my videos to my Twitter. So if you want to find any of my videos when I upload them, they're linked straight to Twitter. Any of my normal uploads, so when I did all my NHL videos the other day, when I did my FA Cup review video, linked straight to Twitter. Pilates. Do I like Pilates? No, I know people who do Pilates and yoga, but I don't. Are you surprised that Qatar still have the World Cup? A little bit, but at the same time, when it was awarded, all those commercial contracts were signed. I think the bigger issue with Qatar having the World Cup is if we look at the World Championship of Athletics that took place, I think in September, October, the crowds there were really poor. The temperatures had a massive impact on like the long distance walk and long distance marathon events. Really hammered the athletes. Poor crowds. I think that's the concern I have with the Qatar World Cup is the crowd numbers, the fact that because it's an Islamic country, alcohol. European fans like to drink, not just an English or home nations thing. European fans like beverages. They like knocking back the sauce. Could there be some cultural insensitivity? Does Qatar actually have the infrastructure for all those fans from all around the world descending on such a small nation with a population of barely over 1 million? But you got to think all the commercial contracts that were signed, all the big sponsors. If you get out of it, FIFA have really dug themselves a hole they can't get out of, so they're going to have to stick with it. But I don't think we'll be going back to the Middle East or anywhere with a hot deserty climate ever again for the World Cup. There are other nations. I mean, the USA, Canada, and Mexico obviously going to be hosting the tournament after in 2026. So we know that there's going to be an expansion of the tournament from 32 teams to 48. We know the tournament's going to grow by another 16 teams by 2026. That's only 6 years away. So we know there's going to be an expansion of the tournament for players, for playing nations. That means more fans. So will the infrastructure of Qatar be up to scratch? For a population of about 1 million people, 1.5 million people, in a very small nation, is there enough hotel spaces? Is there enough fan zones? What's the security going to be like? There's a lot of questions that are very open-ended about hosting a World Cup in the Middle East, considering the political climate right now between Iran and the US, for example. Let's say Iran and the US both qualify for the World Cup. That could be interesting with the geopolitics that's going on right now. Really, really interesting. Will I be watching the Manchester Derby? No, I won't. I actually don't watch a lot of TV. I watch most of my sport on the internet, and I follow all the big news stories and things like that. and discussion points. I'm not a Sky Sports customer, not a BT Sport customer. So no, I won't be watching the Manchester derby. Plus, I don't particularly like either team. And football is, ironically, is not my favourite sport. So you know, football is not my favourite sport by a long shot. It's ice hockey and rugby league and rugby union are my favourite sports by a fair distance. I did I think a year and a half ago I did a list of my favourite sports, like my favourite sports, why I like them. You know, how close is the on the sports list. Football doesn't rank as highly as you think. While it's the most popular sport globally, and while it has the most fans and the most money, it also has a lot of problems. And I've really got to a point now with football where I've fallen out of love with it to an extent. I prefer rugby league. I prefer ice hockey. I prefer rugby union. Yes, those sports also have their issues, and the NFL. I've also gone off that a little bit as well. I've watched every Super Bowl for 16 years, but if I'm brutally honest, I don't know I'll be watching this year's Super Bowl, even though I'm trying to book holiday, Jason, so I can. Hint. Hopefully that's not been rejected by Michelle in the office. Cough, cough. Even though I've watched the last 16 Super Bowls, I'm not sure I'll be watching the Super Bowl this year. I've not watched a single NFL game this year either, this season. I've again started to fall out of love with. Oh, don't tell me it's declined. Don't tell me it's declined. Don't tell me it's been accepted. Please don't tell me it's been declined. Don't be a bugger. You're being a bugger, aren't you? It's been accepted, hasn't it? Jason, I will give you abuse tomorrow in the office. I'll tell you Leeds suck. I'll do a negative video. I'll do a video about Leeds United in a negative fashion. The year they were relegated from the Premier League. That video will be coming. I'm watching you, Jason. Well, on a serious note, work banter aside, I think it has actually been accepted, my holiday. I will say this: the NFL, while it is a great product they actually put out, and they have a great PR machine, there's a lot of problems with the sport. Same with CFL, if you want to watch Canadian football, which is obviously it's basically the same thing, just a slightly different rule set and slightly different layout on the pitch. 3 downs instead of 4. It's more of a running game than a throwing, passing game. American football, North American football, has a lot of issues. A lot of it's to do with the CTE lawsuit, and a lot of it's to do with player misbehaviour and the fact that they've had to roll out a code of conduct. There's a lot of scandal in the NFL and CFL. A lot of players and team owners getting up to some very suspicious activity. I think the Michael Vick scandal, I think, is one of the worst scandals to hit the NFL, with the dogfighting ring and a variety of other offences by Michael Vick, who was the top paid player at the time. And I think that amount of scandal, while the NFL is has sold the product really well over here in London, it's sold the product across the US. It's got NBC, CBS, all that have these massive TV deals. There's been so many scandals in the NFL in my lifetime that have done untold damage to the league. Untold damage to the league. The CTE lawsuit's a big one that they've been fighting for about a decade. We've got allegations against Roethlisberger. You've got Deflategate, Spygate. You've got the Kraft allegations of him being caught in a police operation in a house of ill repute. Is the best way to describe that one, to stay PG for YouTube regulations, because YouTube's getting a little bit about talking about sex workers and stuff. But yeah, the Kraft ownership group, I think it's Robert Kraft, got caught in a police sting in a compromising situation. You've got the Minnesota Vikings boat party video, or allegations of improper conduct at a boat party. Michael Vick, the dogfighting ring. There's a whole host of other allegations. The Kaepernick saga that's not going away, and racism within the sport, and a whole host of other issues. The NFL's got a lot of problems. Not gonna lie, the NFL has a lot of issues, and player welfare is a big part of that. It's not just the CTA, it's player welfare as a whole, with some of the injuries some of these players sustain, not just concussions, but some of the injuries they sustain. It's like every tackle is like a car accident. They really hurt each other a lot. So it's more than just head injuries. It's everything, and players being rushed back, and some of the lesser paid players getting paid not a lot of money. The big superstar quarterbacks and running backs get paid big dollars. So Tom Brady gets paid stupid amounts, but some of the lesser paid players don't get paid as much as you think. And that's why the average salary seems to be so high. But actually, in reality, a lot of the players don't get paid as much as you think. The International Player Pathway Program, is that really as an effective program as the NFL will have us believe? With Christian Wade, for example, signing up. But the fact that Valentine Holmes, an NRL superstar, has gone back to the NRL tells you, is it really working? The Jared Hayne experiment, is this International Player Pathway Program really working? Or is it just a PR exercise? So there's a lot of questions to ask about the NFL, and there's a lot of scandal involved with it. Major League Baseball as well, they've got on the bandwagon to bring games to London a lot later than all the other professional North American leagues. That's another sport beset by scandal and the steroid scandal. It's never really recovered from that, really. There's a few other issues with the Major League Baseball. MLS finally is starting to show real healthy signs of growth and stability. And I've watched a lot of MLS games over the last year or so, and I'm quietly surprised and pleasantly surprised with some of the quality on show. The games are very exciting. They're very open. Maybe not the highest quality, but it makes it more fun when it's end-to-end, open play where defending is not necessarily the best, and it's a very open style of football. So it's fun to watch as a neutral. Yeah. Oh, look, I think there are some really bad injuries in the NFL, but we saw a bad injury for the Worcester Warriors with one of their players at the weekend with what looks like a very serious neck injury that could be career-ending and severely. He's had emergency surgery and he's still in intensive care. So rugby players get injured badly as well. But yes, the injuries in the NFL are shocking. Some of them. There's been some really bad ones. Really bad, and yeah. The helmets and the pads are part of their equipment, plain and simple. But at the same time, the player welfare and various other bits and pieces. NFL players go through a lot of injuries, hell of a lot of injuries. A lot of these players play with some really shocking injuries, play through them when they shouldn't. And are they being looked after? Are they really being looked after? Are they being forced to play when they're hurt? This kind of debate. We have the same debate in the NHL. We've had the same debate in rugby union and rugby league, in the NRL and the Super League and the European Rugby Union and Major League Rugby. Players playing when they're not fully fit, when they really shouldn't. You've got to look at the amount of players who've retired young in the last 4 or 5 years, all the same age as me. Pat Lambie, concussion. Sam Warburton, his shoulder was wrecked. Who else has retired? Dave Denton, concussion-related injuries and repeat injuries. I think, was it Tom Croft? Repeat injuries. Haskell, foot problems. And Haskell's a wanker, but that's my view on James Haskell. I've met him. He's a prat. I went to school with him. He's a wanker. But there's a lot of rugby players who've had to retire young. And Pat Lambie sticks out for me for the concussion. Dave Denton sticks out with me because of the concussion. Lee Halfpenny, how has he still got a career? Because he cannot tackle properly. He really struggles with his tackle technique, puts his head in the bad position, gets hurt a lot and gets concussed a hell of a lot. There's been concerns about George North and the amount of concussions he's had. Dylan Hartley's just retired, couldn't recover from a concussion. You've got to look at the amount of players who've retired in the last couple of years in rugby with concussion or shoulder or neck injuries or back injuries and repeat injuries to those areas of the body. It's a thing, and player welfare is a massive concern. And now we're seeing rugby league and rugby union get caught up in the CTE lawsuit as well. This what started off as a film with Will Smith. No, jokes aside, there was a film with Will Smith that discusses this. What started off as a scientist researching deceased NFL players and researching, just doing an autopsy and doing some research into head injuries and concussion has become a far bigger thing. A new disease has been discovered. There are protocols in place to make sure that if there is concussion protocols. But I have seen some rugby players and NFL players and ice hockey players get concussed. and they're concussed, and you would think, a good 6 to 8 weeks rest, and they're playing the next week or 5 days later, or in the NHL, 5 games later, which could be 10 days later. They're playing within a couple of weeks. And that's really, really concerning. You would think a minimum stand-down period would be more than just a couple of weeks or a few days, because delayed concussion, which a friend of mine has had, you may have a blow to the head and it not seem concussed, or the symptoms won't be there in the first 6 to 10 hours. And then you're in serious trouble and you're going to hospital. As my friend found out 3.5 years ago, we had to take him to hospital. And you don't have to have your head hit to have a concussion. You can be hit in the chest with a proper, solid, legal hit, legal challenge in NFL, ice hockey, rugby league, rugby union, a proper tackle, proper hit, body contact that's allowed within the sports, and get concussed from the whiplash. You can get knocked out cold and not be concussed. So there's still a lot to learn about concussion injuries or contact injuries where the force is going through your body. And I'm not one for saying, let's take fighting out of ice hockey, or let's take, big collisions out of rugby union, rugby league, and NFL. I'm not one for saying that. But when players do get hurt, they need to be looked after better. It's all well and good saying, we'll take the headshots out of the game and high tackles. It's all well and good saying that. We know these players are going to get injured. It's about how they recover from those injuries, and are they being rushed back, especially with concussion. It's a whole big thing. And I've seen so many players who've somehow been clearly concussed in a match play on when they're meant to have a head injury assessment, yet they've somehow passed it and been allowed back on the field to play when clearly they're not fit to do so. So I have some concerns about player welfare, absolutely. And I've done videos on it, and they don't get a lot of views. Sinclair in the World Cup final getting clearly, he was hurt and he was done. It took a minute. A minute into the World Cup final, Sinclair's on the floor, done. He's hurt. He's out. Cold. It's a thing. And I don't know what else I can say on that. But the World Cup final, there were a lot of injuries in that World Cup final. Lou Diaga dislocating his shoulder. I mean, he's going to be out for months. His shoulder injury was nasty. He was in a lot of pain. Straight away, he knew he was not going to finish the game. So there were some bad injuries in that World Cup final, and in the World Cup in general, there was some big, big tackles. Rugby league, there were some massive hits in the NRL last season, massive tackles that left players completely and utterly poleaxed on the field, out cold. Yet they somehow managed to pass the head injury assessments and play on. I do not get that. I think if there's any doubt, take the player out of the game, and regularly assess them over the next week or so, because delayed concussion can sneak up on you, and then you're in serious trouble. It harks back to Sam Burgess playing the grand final in 2014 for 87 or 88 minutes with a broken face. Like, he broke his whole cheekbone, shattered it, and he played on. And he was a key figure in that South Sydney win over Canterbury in the NRL grand final 6 years ago. He played on with a broken head. He actually broke his face. And I'm not joking about that. You can watch the tackle by James Graham on Sam Burgess, and the physical injury to his face. You can see it. It's cringing. It's painful to watch. He shouldn't have played on, but he did. He even made reference to, I've broken my face. You can actually see him lip read with the trainer, I've broken my face. I think I've broken my eye socket. So he fractured his eye socket and broke his cheek and played on. He required surgery to fix that. He's now retired because of repeat injuries, mostly head and neck injuries. He's done. They retired him for health reasons. He's done. He's, I think, the same age as me, 30, 31, something like that. He's retired. He's done. His career's over. So player welfare is a big thing. And it harks back to the injuries. It's I think there was one last season where the guy, did break his back, I think, in a game. And that was due to a real dirty tackle in the NFL. I remember watching, I think it was Cleveland Browns versus the Cincinnati Bengals or something. Really disgusting hit. And And yeah, he was left in a real bad way. And I think I don't think he's walked since. I think he's still learning how to walk. He's still having issues with his neck and back right now and his spinal cord. It happens. I don't know where, like, obviously you don't want to take contact out of these sports, but I think you've got to look after the players better when they are injured, when they are retired. And the CTE lawsuit does sum up that. Oh, absolutely. I do believe that the doctors have to be independent. I think you have to take the team trainers out of it completely. I think it has to be completely independent assessment because I think the system has been abused in the past with the blood bin and the head injury assessment. I think it has been abused. But James Graham has come out and said in the NRL that he thinks players should have a say whether they come off or not. I think you should take it definitely out of the players' hands because they risk injuring themselves more, even though they are brave lads. I have a lot of respect for rugby league players and ice hockey players and rugby union players. I have a lot of respect for them. I really do, because they're not as paid as much as you think. Average salaries globally in those three sports are nowhere near as high as footballers. They are paid a pittance compared to a Premier League football player or an NFL superstar. You look at the average salary of what they're earning, they're not earning anywhere near as much as they should for a sport that has far worse injuries than football and basketball, two of the most highly paid sports in the world. You look at rugby league, rugby union, and ice hockey; they're paid a pittance. Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised. I think the biggest summing up of a failure of duty of care is research a guy called Derek Boogaard, ex NHL. Well, he's passed away now. He was an NHL player. Bit of the rough and tumble enforced type, big fourth line forward. His job was to flatten people and fight people. That was his job. He was a Minnesota Wild player for most of his career. He played a little brief stint with the New York Rangers. Okay. He died in 2011. His death was attributed to prescription medications and alcohol. He accidentally overdosed. But when he was a Minnesota Wild player, they were dosing him up with a variety of painkillers and antidepressants and making him play when he wasn't fit to play. They were putting him out on the ice when he wasn't fit to play. And it all came out after he died. All came out after he passed away is that he was playing when he wasn't fit to play. And he wasn't in a state to play. And he had a medical when he was, I believe, at the Rangers. And the doctor said to him, and this is when he was on injured reserve, he was out injured. And the doctor went to him and was like, how many concussions have you had that you can remember? Like, how many times have you, had blows to the head that you think I'm concussed? At least 100. And the doctor was like, what? And he was like, yeah, I've blacked out at least 100 times playing ice hockey on the ice in a game where I've either been involved in a fight or I've taken a hit and I don't remember playing for the next 5-10 minutes. And the doctor was stunned. So he was put on long-term injured reserve. But then he wasn't necessarily looked after, observed, kept an observation, coming down to training and being around his teammates and actually being involved in the team environment. He was left in his apartment drinking and put on some really strong anti-inflammatory and pain-killing medications that ended up killing him. It's a thing. I don't want to take fighting out of ice hockey. I don't. I like occasionally seeing a scrap, but again, it's the player welfare side of it. It's not that they fight or they throw some big hits. That's not the problem. It's how they're looked after when they're injured. And this is, I think, my argument is players know they're going to get hurt at some point. No player goes through their entire career not getting injured. They know they're going to get hurt. What gets me is how they're looked after. And also how little on average they are paid. Outside the NHL, I think the NHL league minimum is $700,000 a year. $700,000 a year. You work that out. Some Premier League football players will earn that in 2 weeks. The NHL league minimum contract League minimum, I think, is 750 or 780,000. It's between 700 and 800,000 US dollars a year. So remember that. In a year, the average league minimum contract a year. So this is where like the average salary, I think, is 2.6 or 3.6 million US dollars, I believe. So if you work that out, and then you look at the average salary per week in the Premier League, they're earning in the Premier League now a week what they were earning in a year back in the 80s. So Danny Rose is whinging that £50,000 a week is not enough to live on. The average salary the year I was born in 1989 was about £65,000 a year for a top flight professional football player, average. Danny Rose earns that in a week and complains that's not enough. This is where I think sports got it wrong, and especially football and I think basketball as well have got it wrong. Their average salaries are stupid. Their highest paid athletes are on stupid money. Absolutely insane amounts of money, and the salaries keep going up. You look at ice hockey, the league minimum is 730 to 750,000 US dollars. I think it depends if you're in a Canadian market with the exchange rate or a US market in the NHL. The average salary there is a couple million a year. A Premier League football player can earn that in a month on some of the salaries. I'm just putting it out there. They are massively underpaid compared to other sports. Massively. As a player, F1. I think no, actually F1. Some of these so-called safety barriers. If you look at the Spa weekend last season, where in the is it GP2 that fatal crash that happened. The reason why that crash was fatal, two reasons. One, the halo device. Two, the safety barrier at Le Source pinged the car, or was it Eau Rouge, pinged the car back into traffic. Instead of just absorbing it and keeping it stuck in the safety barrier, absorbing the blow, it pinged it, spun it back out into oncoming vehicles at high speed, in a high-speed section of the track. There used to be gravel traps there. If there were still gravel traps there now, with that safety barrier, that car does not ping back out into the road, into the track, where it gets sliced in half by the other cars coming in. So that crash is actually caused by two safety features that have been brought in the last 10 years that have ironically caused a death. I don't know what else to say on that. F1 is also the tracks. You can run wide now and not get punished for it. You run wide at Spa 10, 15 years ago, you're in a gravel trap via a barrier and you're not getting your car out. Now you can run wide going up Eau Rouge and survive. 15 years ago, you run wide up there, you're going to hit the barrier of decelerating through a gravel trap. Now, you don't decelerate through a gravel trap. Nico Rosberg, when his tyre failed in his championship year, when he went backwards into the barrier at 180 mile an hour, his car bounces back out into the track. And that's in a qualifying session. If that was in a race session on the first lap, let's say that tyre fails on the first lap, that is a massive pile-up going up Eau Rouge at 190, 200 mile an hour. I don't believe they've got the safety right. You need gravel traps. They decelerate the vehicles before they smash into the barrier at stupid speeds. That's my personal opinion. Oh, God. What else do we have? What is it? As a player in some sports, like American football, hockey, rugby, you almost expect to get hurt, but you should also be expected to get... Yeah, absolutely. They don't. To get an NHL pension, you have to play a minimum number of games. I think it's 80 games to get an NHL pension. The majority, I think 90% of NHLers don't play 80 games. They get call up from the AHL, play a handful of games, go back down. To get minimum number of games you have to play before you get qualified for an NHL pension. LeBron James is a billionaire. He's also an overrated player. The average wage is 40 grand a week in the Premier League. I think it's actually higher than that. I think you'll find it's higher than that. The average player in the NFL and NBA will earn... I wouldn't say they earn a lot more. I would say I suppose the NBA, yes. Their average salary is higher than the Premier League's average salary. And also that's per year because there's less players on a team. But again, you have league minimum. There are league minimum contracts. And I think the NFL actually, the average is skewed because of the top paid players like Tom Brady and Michael Vick, and some of the quarterbacks and running backs get paid silly money, whereas the defensive linebacker gets paid like 80 grand a year, and that distorts the average. Is there are so many players getting paid a very little amount of money, and then so few players getting paid stupid money, it actually distorts the average, when in reality, most NFL players don't get paid as much as you think. It's the other way around. I think 80% of NFL players get paid a lot less than you think, and 20% get paid more, which distorts the league average salary. NBA, the salaries are stupid for bouncing a ball around for 4 quarters of 20 minutes and scoring 150 points a game. It's just stupid salaries for basketball players. You look at a rugby player, an ice hockey player, they're not paid anywhere near as much. I think Sonny Bill Williams is the highest played player in either kind of rugby right now, and I think £10 million. I think he's on the biggest rugby contract of all time, but they're not on massive money. The NBA, I mean, the NBA has problems of its own. A lot of the players are massively overpaid, and while it's the most profitable league in the world, the players are massively overpaid for what they do. Massively overpaid. And I wouldn't say it's a niche sport, but it doesn't necessarily get fans from, let's say, certain backgrounds into the sport as much as it could. Especially fans from, let's say, in America at least, from the Asian community, the Hispanic community. I think it's an interesting one. I think you could argue that rugby, again, how much does the NHL players get paid in the crowd? The league minimum is $700,000 to $800,000 US. I think it depends. If you're in a Canadian market, you get paid a little bit more. The average salary is around $2.8 million US in the NHL. Bearing in mind there's signing on bonuses. You take the signing on bonuses out, they're not actually an escrow. They're not actually as paid as much as you think. An escrow is a big talking point when it comes to the collective bargaining agreement, which has been extended. It looks like they're going to extend, or at least continue with what's sort of in place now. But I think the bubble's going to burst. Absolutely, it has to at some point. The overinflated transfer market in football and the ticket price keep going up, and declining numbers of crowds. In the FA Cup this weekend, just gone, 150,000 less fans attended games in the third round this year than last year. And that means clubs have made less money, unless they've hiked the ticket price up to make the same amount of money, which is illogical, really. The attendance at the FA Cup this weekend was nearly 250,000 less than last year. And we haven't even had the replays yet. And there's already about 150 to 160,000 less fans have been to games. I was mentioned at the beginning of the stream. The transfer market is unsustainable, I believe. The amount of times the transfer record has been broken in the last 5 years, even before Neymar, is insane. Harry Maguire and Virgil van Dijk are not worth the money that they were paid for. Even though Virgil van Dijk is a brilliant player, world-class player, no player should be worth 75 million. I mean, 7.5 million now buys you a squad player, whereas 10, 15 years ago, you could actually get a world-class player for that kind of money. It's gone mad. Rugby League Challenge Cup, we've discussed that. The 2 lowest attendances in the last 2 Challenge Cup finals since the war, and they have also been declining for the last 6 years. The issue is with Wembley. Unless you get the London Broncos playing at Wembley, and even then the London Broncos fan base is, I think, only 45,000 people identify themselves as official London Broncos fans globally. That's globally. Wolves fan. I mean, I'm hearing this a lot from a lot of people. Is crowd numbers were down. Crowd numbers and atmosphere was not what it was, and it's a trend. So we'll see what happens. But I think ticket price has got something to do with it. The amount of games on TV might have something to do with it. Economics as well. The players are demanding more money. The TV companies are demanding more money for the subscriptions, and people just don't want to pay it. People don't want to pay it anymore. There's going to become a breaking point where the average salary just cannot keep up with demands, and fans is going to stay away. The traditional fans, not the overseas corporate crap that are plastic fans. The actual fans of the clubs, of the franchises, they're going to start staying away in larger and larger numbers, and more and more empty seats. Because, as I said, paid attendance versus actual attendance are two different things. And with all the tickets given away to corporations, lots of empty seats, and those fans don't turn up, even though the tickets are bought and paid for. Yeah, you can say that, but if, let's say, Wolves get to another FA Cup semi-final, get to a final and win it, you'll be saying a different thing when you've got silverware. That's my personal opinion on that one. But I do think attendance is down, and that's across the board. And league average attendances are down across all four of the professional leagues in the Football League structure, including the Premier League. They actually are down. It's a trend, and I think it was 12 million. I think you'll find he went. I should know. We sold him, and we sold him, I think, in '96. 10 million now. You're getting an average squad player. 10 million then was like silly money. So you look at Shearer's transfer in the mid-90s from Blackburn to Newcastle, and you look at Harry Maguire from Leicester to Man United. It's just not even on the same scale. And Harry Maguire is a decent defender, but I think he's made a terrible mistake. I think he's been unsettled by the whole move. I think he's gone from a team that's full of positivity to a team full of negativity, and it's affecting his play. He's really declined massively in 6 months. He's gone from a top defender, working in a system that suits the style of play. That he's happy, he's confident, he's run a happy transfer, a happy squad, and he's gone into an organisation that's in a funk, which is Man United, and it's just a mess. How long before £1 billion transfer? 10 years. I think the bubble's going to burst before then, and Mbappe will not go for £500 million. I think Neymar overinflated the market massively. I just don't see it happening. I don't think fans would tolerate that, really. Because the ticket price would have to go up across, because all the other clubs will want to compete, and the financial fair play rules would dictate that you can't do that. But it wouldn't surprise me if the transfer record that we have with Neymar at £250 million, roughly, about 250 million, depending on sources and add-ons and things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if that does get broken. But £500 million, you could buy a sports team for that. You could buy the Vegas Golden Knights for that. That's what they had to buy to get into the league of the NHL. £500 million. You could buy an NHL franchise for that. You could buy a whole sports team for that. That is insane. That is completely and utterly insane. Madness. You could buy the rest of the French league for that, apart from maybe AS Monaco and Marseille for that money. That's just how insane the football transfer market's become. I think he feels he can win more cups with yeah, I don't know on that. Not so sure on that. I think Brendan Rodgers, the fact that Leicester are second and Man United are fifth, tells you a different story. Yes, and Man United need a replay against Wolves, whereas Leicester are through to the next round, the FA Cup. And yeah, I think people are already turning off football. The crowd numbers at the FA Cup this weekend would tell you that. If you've got a historical competition that has always had good crowds in the third round of that competition, is down by 165,000. It's between 150 and 165,000 fans on last year, when last year's numbers showed a decline from the year before, and a year before that, there's been a decline, and it's been a really rapid one. If 150 to 160 odd thousand less people have gone through turnstiles to watch games in the FA Cup, that tells you that's already happening. People are already switching off. People are already voting with their wallets and their feet, and they're not going to games. And that affects the clubs, especially the clubs at the lower end of the spectrum who rely heavily on the FA Cup to make a lot of their revenues for the season. A good cup run can really help with gate receipts for a non-league or a lower league club massively. If 150,000, and that's a minimum estimate, are not going to games. Now, that's not including paid for and actual attendance. So, again, paid attendance and actual attendance are two different things. Actual attendance are those who actually turn up. Paid attendance is the amount of tickets sold. The fact that Carlisle drew, I think, 5,500 fans at the Cardiff City Stadium tells you fans are already switching off. And you'll see a lot in last season's videos with the FA Cup that I did when I was reviewing games. Empty seats, empty seats, empty seats. Always mention that. I think in every FA Cup review until the semi-finals and the final, mentioning empty seats at this game. It's a cup game, empty seats. Really surprising. It's a thing. Now, could that be ticket price? Could that be transport problems? Kickoff time. No, they don't have terrible support. I mean, Cardiff, Swansea, Newport, and Wrexham. They've got passionate, fans. But at the same time, really surprised, especially like a team like Cardiff, which always does well with the selling tickets. Fans not showing up. Fans not going to a cup game. Really, 5,500 turn up for Cardiff, and it's embarrassing for TV. The TV companies must be going, we've got to sell this product. This is like one of the most historical cup competitions in the world. How are we going to sell this globally when no one wants to go to the games? I think they've oversaturated the TV market as well. No, it's the League Cup. No one cares. No one cares. It's the League Cup. It's not the Carabao Cup. It's the League Cup. Ticket prices have an impact, and kickoff times. The late kickoff, Friday night games, Monday night games, midweek games. They don't want them. Fans do not want them. TV companies want them. Kickoff time has been changed for TV, even if it's by half hour, 20 minutes. You got to think, if you're the away fan, you might have to leave 4 hours earlier. Again, this is why I think Carlisle didn't travel in great numbers, and the Cardiff Carlisle was such a poor attendance. Is the Carlisle fans have got to go over half the length of the UK to get to a game, and too many games on TV and bad times. Too many games on TV and at bad times. Too many televised games. Sky and BT are killing the sport, and everyone says, "Oh, the money, the TV money has done great." You're talking at your ass. TV money's done great for cricket. Apparently, that's why attendances are down. That's why they're coming up with the 100 format, because attendances are down and that they are losing money. Rugby league, teams are going bust. Empty seats, losing money. Rugby union starting to go the same way. They want to ring fence the Premiership, but if Saracens or Leicester go down, they want to ring fence it. Why? To protect the big teams? I don't know. The fact that they're changing Champions League times. I mean, the Champions League died for me when they put it on BT Sport. The Europa League died for me when they put it on BT Sport. I now have no interest. I think the more that gets put behind a paywall, the less I love. I do not. It's the greed. It's the greed, and it will implode. And when it happens, all these overplayed prima donnas in football will be bawling their eyes out, going, "Oh, I can't get a job." Well, you shouldn't have asked for stupid wages. Carlisle would have had to stop in the Midlands to train. There's no way they're getting down on the day to do the pre-match warm-up. They would have to stop on the way down, and this is where the FA needs to look at kickoff times and look at away fan transport. And the FA is a very wealthy organisation, actually helping away fans get to and from games, actually putting things in place to make it easier for fans to get there. Leeds fan, 9,000 Leeds fans made the trip down from Yorkshire, but I think a handful of Carlisle fans actually managed to make it to Cardiff, and that is damning. Absolutely damning. If Carlisle was played Bournemouth, for example, in the cup, that would have been even worse. Because that's one of the longest away days you could come up with, apart from I think Carlisle Plymouth is one of the longest away days I think you could come up with in an SA in any kind of league. If Carlisle and Plymouth, I think they are in the same league actually. I think that's the longest. Oh look, when the bubble bursts, they're going to wish they didn't ask for so much bloody money a week. Some of the money they're getting a week, they should be getting a year. Like Oscar in the Chinese Super League is getting 400,000 a week. If they got that a year, I will be happy with that. I wouldn't complain. They're getting that a week. They're getting a year's salary in a week, and that's what's obscene. Is they've demanded they've got these obscene. Hope Bury Football Club next season can be a team. I think that was badly handled by the FA and the Football League. They have a lot of questions to answer for the failure there. And the TV companies have a lot to answer for as well. I think the shared rights with the Champions League and Europa League and the League Cup were all on free-to-air and on pay-per-view TV. You got the best TV attendance and the best attendances. Now it's behind a paywall. Oh, look, attendances are dropping. Fans are switching off. And they don't want to know. They're after. It's all about the money. And there will become a point where fans just will refuse to pay the overinflated ticket price to prop up the transfer market and these players' obscene wages. It will happen. It's a cup. The French FA are scrapping their League Cup from next season. It's been devalued, and I think that's another problem. The Cup Winners' Cup being taken off and taken out by UEFA from now. We're not going to have the Cup Winners' Cup anymore, which was a European Cup competition until 1999, which I remember very fondly. It's no longer a cup competition. They took that away in '99. They scrapped it, devalued the domestic cup competitions, and the French FA are now scrapping their version of the League Cup from next season, which is a crying our shame because that's actually a very historical cup competition as well. That's being scrapped because it's been devalued and fans don't turn up. And there you go. I think the TV companies, the pure greed there, which is also supplementing the obscene player. I mean, the Premier League clubs, I think 3.5 years ago, half of them could have let us in for a tenner and made a profit, massive profit margin, and the other half could have let us in for free and still made a profit, still made a massive profit without actually harming their France should scrap its domestic league as well. It's shite. I'm not wrong there. That's the French league has become a laughing stock with the fact that PSG have basically bought it forevermore. No other team can compete with them financially because they're allowed to breach financial fair play, and UEFA do sod all about it. Plain and simple. If they can afford to buy 2 players for a combined title, I think about 300 and what was it? Was it 340 million euros a couple of years ago with Neymar and another player? It's just it completely devalues it. But no, the TV companies want more and more money, and the fans, the League Cup is a joke anyway because fans don't show up. They don't care. Fans haven't cared about that for yeah, but if it's an easy back on an accumulator, then the odds of them losing would be pretty good. The odds of them winning are like 2-1. You don't bet on that. If the odds of them losing are 50-1, you bet on that. And they lost in the French League Cup the other week as well. They actually lost. Yeah, they lost. It was embarrassing. But the French domestic league's been poor for a few years now, and that's to do with PSG. It's to do with PSG. It's not been a very competitive league for a while. Yet somehow they're the world champions. Who would have thought? But the best French players don't play in France because their domestic league is so bad. It's a no-brainer. And yeah, the age of the people who are getting the big wages, the 21-year-olds who want silly money a week when they haven't actually earned their stripes yet is you can get paid 50 grand to do sod all. Danny Rose is a prime example of an overrated player who gets paid far too much. I'm not a big fan of Danny Rose. Look, the German league's been competitive for I think a couple of seasons, but Bayern have finally hit a brick wall for the first time in like a decade. I think the last team that wasn't Bayern or Borussia Dortmund to win the league was Wolfsburg 11 years ago. the German league's finally got a bit competitive for the first time in a while. Look, there are several very uncompetitive leagues in Europe when it comes to actually who wins the title. France, Germany, Scotland, same team every year. You just get the name chiseled in. I think Scotland's becoming more competitive, but it's taken too long at the detriment of the national side. And if you win more than 2, 3, 4, 5, if you win 2 or 3 times in a row, it does end up harming the league, no doubt. But it's happened in Italy, it's happening in France. It's basically Spain's only got 3 clubs that can ever win it at the moment, and that's causing problems. I don't know what you can say really, but I think fans are starting to turn off. I actually honestly believe fans are starting to switch off. The attendances in Italy are dropping. Attendances in France aren't great. They are starting to go, we've had enough of this. It's not an enjoyable watch for us anymore. And that is a thing. That is an actual trend. It's a thing. Fans are going, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I don't want to watch anymore. I think the bubble. Oh, it's when the Spanish league threatened to take games to the US, and fans were like, no, can't do that. We have a say in how the clubs are run. You can't do that. And it backfired on the Spanish league massively. Bad PR move. I think the fact that it's been like a decade since Wolfsburg won the league in Germany. I think Borussia Dortmund have won it a couple of times since then, but it's basically been Bayern Munich for about 7, 8 years. That has, for me, it's not been a great advert, I think. And the Spanish fans basically go, you can't do that. Because ironically, the Spanish fans have a bigger say in how their clubs are run than British fans do. Because they're all members of the club. They said, no, you can't do that. And when the players said, we'll go on strike if you do that, for once the players actually had a backbone and actually did the right thing. I think with the racism question here in the UK, the PFA, why aren't the players going on strike? If the Spanish players threaten to go on strike, can get action done when they don't agree with something, maybe that's the way for the PFA and the English players to go. Okay, we'll go on strike then. Because the FA is all they seem to do when these racism allegations surface about fans racially abusing players. Strongly worded statement going, boo-hoo, this is unacceptable. No actual action. Words, but no action. I think action has to happen, and the best way to get action is for the players to go on strike. The Spanish players threatened to go on strike with Girona, Barcelona being, having games being planned to be played in the US. Fans were up in arms, almost in open revolt, and the players were like, we're going on strike if you do that. Oh yeah, no, they do. They talk a lot, but don't actually take action when necessary. The FA released a very strongly worded statement saying, we condemn this and wholeheartedly. They must have the PR department of the Premier League and the FA or the EFL and all these organisations. They must have the copy and paste template. Insert name of club, will not tolerate, unacceptable, blah, 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 blah. No actual action taken. None. The PFA has to start taking affirmative action. If that means the players go on strike to get the positive outcome where the FA finally does something, because go back a couple of years to when Mark Sampson was sacked when he was in charge of the England women's team for, firstly, he was on a hot fire for making racist jokes, but he was actually sacked for something completely different. And the Eni Aluko scandal, the FA were brought before the government select committee, the parliamentary select committee on sport, media and culture. And the select committee said, you as an organisation are not fit for purpose. You're not inclusive enough. Your management is run by old, middle-aged white men, and you're not good enough. You're not fit for purpose for a variety of issues when it comes to players or coaches or club employees bringing forward concerns about racism, bullying, sexism, harassment, inappropriate, any kind of abuse. The FA was told, you are not good enough, you are not fit for purpose. Okay? Fast forward a couple of years, nothing has changed. The FA releases strongly worded statement. Oh, boo-hoo, we're not happy with this. No actual action. No action. oh yeah. They have just a copy and paste, template, change a few words, put strong words in there, abhorrent and not in keeping with the sport. Post it, release the statement, have some PR guy read the statement, or PR girl, because we can't be sexist here. Read the statement, going, "We do not agree with this. We think this is blah 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 blah. Blah. No action actually taken." I think it's got to a point now where the PFA has to go, right, we're going on strike, and see what happens then. I think the players, though, have dug themselves a hole by being paid too much, and they will not get a lot of sympathy from a lot of people because of their salaries. And when players like Danny Rose, who I can't stand for other reasons, partly because he's a crap player, he's overrated, he's also overpaid, says 50 grand a week's not enough for me, I want 100. Mate, you've won fuck all as a player. You've not won anything. Not a single trophy, not a single winner's medal. You've won nothing. And you want to double your wages. But, mate, you're crap. And when he goes, the fine dished out for, I think, what nation was it for the racist charter? Was it Montenegro or something? He goes, I spend that in a weekend. Oh, so you're whinging about 50 grand not enough being enough for you to live on, but you're happy to throw away 40 grand a weekend. No wonder you've got no money to live on. The guy, Danny Rose, is a moron. He doesn't speak for young black men who suffer racism and discrimination every day of the week. He doesn't speak for young Asian men. He doesn't speak for young white men who feel disinvolved with society for whatever reason, feeling like they can't, succeed in life. He doesn't speak for young men in this country from whatever background. He doesn't speak for young women, the gay community. He doesn't speak for anyone. He's a greedy, overpaid, living in a bubble, doesn't know what the real world is. Because he's been through the academy, he's been spoon-fed since the age of 16, he's clueless. And when he says the fines for Bulgaria or Montenegro, I think it was Montenegro at this time. I think because Montenegro was before Bulgaria. 40 grand, that's nothing, that's not enough. I blow that in a weekend. But then a week later, he complains, it's true, he complains, 50 grand a week, not enough, I want 100. But you just said you blow 40 grand a weekend. So what are you going to do? Blow 80 grand a weekend then? This is how out of touch some of these players are. Now, I agree they should go on strike to get affirmative. And that's through all the leagues. That's with League 1 and League 2 where they get paid sod all week. They get paid like 400 quid a week, which is still a fair bit of money. They can still get paid a fair decent wage. 500 or 600 grand a week, something like that. They're not on the same salary as the Premier League. They still get paid 60 grand a year, something like that. Right? He's not even worth a tenner a week, mate. He's complete duffer. But when a player is coming out going, 40, 50 grand a week's not enough for me, I need 100. I'm thinking to myself, what you're earning a week used to be the average salary for a top flight football player in the 80s and early 90s before the Premier League era. A year. You're earning that in a week, and you're saying that's not enough. What you earn in a week is more than 95% of this country earns in a year before tax. You put taxes into that, bills, food, drink, to survive. How out of touch are these people? So they're not going to get a lot of sympathy from fans who go, they're overpaid. Why do they deserve sympathy for words, being thrown at them? Oh, no, someone called you a monkey. And this is what you're finding online. I don't agree with that. I think that is wrong. Racism, I think it's wrong. Homophobia, I think it's wrong. The abuse some of them face and sectarianism, all that, I think it is wrong. It's a stain on the sport. It's a stain on society. But they're not going to get a lot of sympathy because of the amount of money they're paid. I think... Gary Lineker, he actually was getting paid above average salary, but he wasn't getting paid 50 grand a week. No. He might get that a month, not a week. And not even that. I think he earned shit. I've got to think now. It was about 2-3 grand a week, but back then it's still a lot of money. And he won stuff. So I actually have time for Gary Lineker. He actually won a few things. I've met his sons as well, and I've met him a fair few times. He's a quite pleasant chap, actually. A bit orange, and I don't agree with him all politically, but I've met him. He's quite a nice chap, actually. I've met Gary Lineker. He's well-spoken, and he's quite pleasant, quite friendly. He runs a summer camp, football summer camp at my old school. So I see him around my local area quite a lot in the summer. He gets out and about, and he lives locally. He shops locally. He's local to the area that I've been brought up in. Very down to earth guy. Danny Rose is nowhere near the same quality of player and the same quality of human being. He doesn't live in the real world. He gets paid more than Gary Lineker does now anyway. Gary Lineker gets paid like £1 million a year or something, 1.8 million a year for his work with the BBC and BT Sport. Danny Rose, 52 weeks a year, gets paid a hell of a lot more money than Gary Lineker, even now. Oh no, they won't leave. It's not just Glaswegian football; it's Scottish football in general because Hibs Hearts have sectarian. I work with a Scottish girl, who's a Hibs fan, in our office at our depot, and she went up for the was it Celtic Hibs Cup semi-final, and it was just sectarian chanting by both sets of fans of a Catholic nature towards their Protestant neighbours in Hearts and Rangers who weren't playing that day. It's not just Glaswegian football; it's Scottish football. It's a thing. And it's damning on Scottish society that in 2020 we're still talking about sectarian chanting, and some of the crowd disorder up in Scotland is embarrassing. The amount of times Rangers and Aberdeen and Celtic and Hibs and Hearts and Motherwell and damn it, even Partick Thistle have been told you've got to behave. We're going to shut sections of your stadium. We're going to fine you, and Scottish football doesn't have the money to be fined. But yeah, if the players want to actually, especially the lower league players, go on strike. If the lower league players in League One and League Two went on strike, that would piss off the EFL, who deserve to be pissed off because of the way they handled the Bury situation. Macclesfield, another club in trouble. The players went on strike. The EFL punished the club. It's not the club's fault. It's the owner's fault. Go after the owner, not the club. The club is the fans. The club is the players. Don't go after them. But if the players went on strike, fixtures go uncompleted. It makes the TV companies a bit mad because they can't sell their products, and it will actually get things going, get change happening. Because until the players make a stand saying we've had enough of this, the statements is one thing, and players threatening to walk off the pitch is one thing. Actually, have the players go on strike, refuse to play, make sure no fixtures get paid. Then the FA will have to do something. Oh, look, Scotland's got problems. They want independence. Let them have it. Sod it. Let them have it. Because it will dissolve into sectarian violence on the streets in seconds. That's what the SNP want. The SNP are clueless. But politics can stay off the channel as much as possible. But yeah, absolutely. I think sectarianism or racism or homophobia or just general abuse towards players, you don't go to work to get abused. And they are members of the PFA. Go on strike. That is the only way they're going to get change. That's the only way they're going to actually get some kind of action taken by the FA. The FA has been proven in the Houses of Parliament, in a select committee, not to be fit for purpose. That was only 2 years ago. And the select committee said not fit for purpose. Let that sink in. Has anything changed with the FA? Nope. Have the Premier League actually hired a new chief executive to replace Scudamore? Nope. Did they give him a nice little payment package off? Yep. So football's got problems. The money is the problem. So if you harm the ability for the clubs and the TV companies and the league to make money by going on strike, they might start doing something about the issues that players and fans face. Look, the Scottish football. It's more than an old firm issue. It's an issue right across the Scottish League. Celtic and Rangers fans and Hibs and Hearts fans promote the big four for the sectarianism, but all the clubs have a sectarian element, behave really badly, and why they wonder why clubs are struggling financially because fans don't want to go. Kids, the families don't want to go. When you've got predominantly, I think 90% of the crowd white, male, and drunk, they want to reverse the alcohol ban in stadiums in Scottish football, which is insane. They voted in favour of abolishing the alcohol ban. They want to bring alcohol back into the stadiums. Do they not remember Rangers in the Europa League final or UEFA Cup final in 2008 against St. Petersburg in Manchester when the big screen failed and 10,000 Rangers fans smashed up Manchester City Centre just for fun? Yeah, the Bulgarian. I mean, it's not just an English problem or a Scottish problem; it's a European problem. There's been a rise in the hard left and far right in politics, and that's been transpired across football as well. There's battles in Hamburg between St. Pauli and Hamburg SV in the Bundesliga 2, because Hamburg St. Pauli, big city rivals. St. Pauli are very hard left, militant, almost Marxist kind of following. Hamburg has a far right following. Livorno in the Italian league, very hard left leaning, almost communist Marxist, hard left fans, and then lots of like Inter and Lazio fascists follow the club. It's worrying. Celtic Rangers always sectarian. Rangers actually had a club policy until I think the 80s not to sign any Catholic players. You had to be a Protestant. It's been there before the IRA, and the IRA's and the Ulster Loyalists and the Republican and Nationalist. It's not just the IRA; it's also you've got the Red Hand Brigade. It predates it. The Celtic Rangers sectarianism has been an issue in not just Scotland but Ireland since the 1760s, if not before then. But then there's been a lot of Protestants who are also nationalists and a lot of Catholics who are also unionists. So that really muddles the waters. It does. But the sectarian element along political lines has been there for quite some time. I think 17. Oh God, I've got to remember my history now, and it's going to blow my head up. I think 1790, the Battle of the Boyne. There you go. The Orange Order. The Jacobites. It goes back to the wars of religion, so it goes back about 400 years. With a football context, that's a different kettle of fish. I prefer to keep things like the UDA and the IRA off the. I think I prefer to keep paramilitary talk off this channel, considering that I have Irish heritage and my dad was in the British Army for 24 years. And served in during the Troubles. I would rather keep it off the channel. Let's just say my dad knew some people who didn't come home. Oh, the Scottish fans will never behave. They're not fans; they're pissheads. No offense to Scottish football fans, but there is an issue with alcohol and gang and Scottish football's had an issue for years. I've got books on the subject. Scottish football's had issues with fan trouble for a long time. Same with English football. Some of the Scottish fan disturbances go back to like 1910. There's been an issue, but Scottish football's had issues for years. Not just a fan misbehaviour, but a whole host of financial problems and corruption and clubs struggling and lack of investment. And my family dinners must be awkward. I live by myself. Getting enough money to cook dinner is awkward. It's an interesting one. My family dinners aren't really awkward. I live by myself now, so Scottish football fans are. If you follow you follow the channel for quite some time, you've seen the abuse that Welsh rugby fans give me when I criticise the national side, but they barely support their club sides. I find Welsh rugby fans one of the most toxic fan bases I've ever come across, ever. Welsh rugby union fans are a shitty fan base because of a minority that have a chip on their shoulder. They don't support their club game. They wonder why it's buggered, but they only turn up and wear the leeks and the sheep for the bloody internationals. But they don't actually follow the club game through thick and thin. They don't give a toss about it. But when it comes to the Six Nations and the Autumn Internationals and the World Cup, they whack on their scarlet red jerseys. They whack on those stupid inflatable leek things and the inflatable sheep, and they pretend to give a toss. And then they don't. Most Rangers and Celtic fans support either Northern Ireland or Ireland when it comes to football, because most Celtic fans are Irish, and most Rangers fans are probably on travel bans anyway, so they can't watch the team play. The irony of that. But I mean, what I find interesting is all the Scottish football fans who follow this channel, all of them, Every single one of them, be it Celtic, Rangers, I've got Aberdeen fans, Johnston, Kilmarnock, I think there's some Motherwell fans who follow the channel. Every single one of them. I think there's even a Partick fan who follows the channel. Every single one of the Scottish football fans of whatever club, of whatever colour, all of them, without a shadow of a doubt, say we hate sectarianism in our game. If only more Scottish fans could say that, and stop allowing the 5%, the 10%, the 15%, maybe, I don't know how high it is, of club fans being morons. Because I've got one of my moderators is a Celtic fan. Another one of my moderators is a Rangers fan. They're both from Glasgow. They live a few miles apart. Both of them have said we hate sectarianism. The banter they have is tongue in cheek. It really is. But they both have come out very openly and said on live streams and in comment sections, we hate the sectarianism. Why is it still in 2019 or 2020 part of the sport? And I don't know what it is about football, but it's a problem. You look at Scottish rugby, or you look at ice hockey, because there's some professional teams in the ice hockey. It doesn't matter if you're a Catholic or a Protestant, and you're a fan of the Glasgow Clan in the Elite League. You go to the game, you leave as friends. Glasgow Warriors versus the Edinburgh Capital, the Edinburgh, in the Pro League, the Pro 14. You go as friends. You got the Dundee Stars and the Five Flyers and the Glasgow Clan. You go as, it doesn't matter what, in other sports, you go there as friends, you leave as friends. You go watch the touring cars at Knockhill. You go there, you leave. No problems. The cricket, the T20, you go as friends. I do not understand why football seems to have this problem in Scottish sporting society when the other sports, be it professional or amateur, that Scottish fans go to. And I mentioned some of the professional teams, so Edinburgh and Glasgow in the Pro 14. Glasgow Clan, Five Flyers and Dundee Stars in the Elite League. And then you've got the Scottish National League hockey as well, which is semi-professional. Okay? You've got but then football. For some reason, football. And I look at it and go, why can the other professional sports in Scotland? NFL, you had the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. Not a single problem. Football, one of my friends is Glaswegian, and he's actually from the Asian community. Okay, so he's a Muslim. He's Pakistani, but he's born and bred Scottish. Okay, he's second generation immigrant to this country. Good friend of mine, and he goes, "I hate the sectarian. I'm trying to get my head around the sectarianism." And and this is what's turning people off. Is the fans? Is for some reason the culture within Scottish football is such that it's still an issue. And then we come south of the border, and it's the same clubs that misbehave here, like Chelsea, Tottenham, Millwall, Leeds. No offence, Leeds, but you have misbehaved and there is racism involved. I'm not going to lie. All right. You look at the same clubs that have the racism allegations thrown at them. Manchester United, Chelsea, Tottenham. Tottenham really surprises me with the multicultural area of North London they're in. Same with Arsenal. Right? The same clubs regularly have fans misbehaving in large numbers. It's serious. Jason, I know, we're joking a little bit here with the fact we have a bit of banter at work, but in general, the same clubs that have the issue with the racism, so the Chelseas, the Tottenhams, the Man Uniteds, in English football, are the same clubs in Scotland. It's like Rangers, Celtic, Hibs, Hearts. They're the ones that regularly keep coming up with the sectarianism, and they wonder why. And they go, "Oh no, this club's worse." Oh, but I'm thinking to myself, really. Like, it's the same clubs over and over again that are regularly in the newspapers for their fans misbehaving when it comes to a sectarian or racist nature, or even homophobic nature. Same clubs, regularly. And I'm thinking to myself, the Scottish FA and the FA are doing nothing here. They release strongly worded statements saying this is wrong, this is unacceptable, and then no action's taken. None. No, actually, no, in the EPL, it's a bit more than just a few people. It's a bit more than a few. Because you look at the arrests at clubs. And every time an instance reported of racist chanting or sectarian chanting, it's the same clubs that come up. And then you look at the amount of fans arrested, for disorder at games, and again the same clubs rank highly on the list. Newcastle's actually one of the worst clubs for arrests at games. They've taken over the hooligan element over the last 10 years. They're one of the worst clubs. But you look at the arrests at games for disorder over a season or over a match weekend. It's there. Ravens Titans. Oh, we have an NFL question. Now, I sadly haven't really been following the NFL, as I say at the beginning of the stream, as much as I used to. But I might try and watch the Super Bowl, Jason. The Ravens Titans. The Tennessee Titans the last couple of years have had a really exciting team, really exciting offensive lineup. The Ravens. It's a tough one. I think it's the most open playoffs now with Brady and the Patriots not being there. It makes it kind of fun to actually possibly watch a couple of games in the playoffs before the Super Bowl. I still think that's going to be a close one as well. I don't try and pick teams to win. I don't try and predict. I like being a neutral. But unfortunately, I haven't really watched the NFL this season, so I can't really comment on what has happened this year. But I think the Titans last season were very, very offensively minded and really fun to watch at times. And the Ravens are a solid playoff team. So I think that's going to be a very even contest. I'm definitely going for an even contest, but I think I'm going to go with the Titans for their offense. They are an exciting offensive team. But I think by 5. It's going to be a closer game. I think there's going to be a field goal in there. There could be an intercept in there. I think it's going to be a very close game. I think it's going to be defense versus offense in that one. It's going to be a more tactical, but also kind of fun to watch because they're really going to go for it. The Ravens learn how to win. The Titans have got there for a reason as well. The Ravens have Super Bowl experience in their lineup and have won the Super Bowl in recent times. So it's one of them. The Titans haven't. The Ravens have. It's that kind of. But they're both playoff teams and they both have playoff experience. But the Ravens have a few players in their roster that actually won that Super Bowl a few years back. So it's a tight one. It's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a close one. I might go with the Titans. Just 5 points. 5 points to the Titans. Yes, there was that Newcastle fan who did punch a police horse in the face. That was against Sunderland a couple of years ago when Sunderland beat them 3-0. I had some friends who were at that game as well. Oh, that's embarrassing. But yeah, no, that's the disorder you get. The disorder at English games is not as bad as what it was 25 years ago, 30 years ago. It's nowhere near as bad. I'm just going to put that out there. Nowhere near as bad. But it's starting to rise again. And the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s with a period of time when British football was in a right state with the hooligan element. There's still that element there. And it is a concern. Not going to lie, it is a concern. But the fan punching the horse, he was that drunk. I don't know. The F1 changes are happening in 2021, not this season. They're happening next season. So this coming season, they're not happening. They're happening in 2021. I think F1 might have already lost a few more fans by then, with the TV rights still being solely on Sky. I think that's put off a lot of fans in this country. Is the TV rights, and I think Liberty Media have to tread very carefully. I think I've done a video on the NFL possibly moving a team to London. I don't think it's going to happen. Economically, a lot of things have changed from when they had their first London Series game. In 2007, we had the financial crash a year later, 2008. When they interviewed the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, back then, and I think there was the business CEO of the NFL. Their plans were 10 years later, we'll have a team. We're now 13 years later, we don't have a team. I don't think it's going to happen. Our tax rate is higher over here in the UK than in the US. I think the attempt by Shahid Khan to buy Wembley, that fell through, and that damaged the image of the NFL a little bit, with a lot of fans of sport in general, and football fans really were, and that's association football, that's English football fans, were really annoyed with the fact that the time difference of 5 hours from the east coast of the US to here, travel, logistics, tax rate being higher. What players what free agents want to come to a location where they're going to be paying more tax, and the weather's naff. The weather isn't as great in the winter here as it is in Florida, where you can play for the Miami Dolphins, or Arizona, where you can play for the Arizona Cardinals, for example, or LA with the Rams. If you're a free agent, where would you want to be? A city with a low tax rate, like Florida, really low tax rate, warm weather, or London in the cold, wet, damp. The logistics, the currency exchange, the tax rate, the jet lag, the player welfare, the TV times. The US networks will be ripping their hair up because we're 5 hours ahead, and they want prime time viewing for the East and West Coasts. Come on, only 8 home games a season. Ticket price. Would fans right now? Yeah, the one-off games. They can pick and choose. Oh, the Ravens are playing the Chargers, or my Green Bay. I like the Green Bay Packers. They're playing the Minnesota Vikings. That would be a big draw for a one-off game in London. But then you've got to think not all the teams have played in London yet, and you want to have every team play at least one home game in London, one away game in London. And the Jacksonville Jaguars have got some favourable treatment. They're a shit team, and if you want to move a team, the team's got to be decent. So why would you want to move a team that can't win in Jacksonville to London? Fans will not want to pay for 8 home games, stupid big money, to watch a team that can't win. They've had, I think, 2 winning seasons in their history. I think 1 winning season on Shahid Khan's ownership. Why would you want to? Yeah, and you've got to bear in mind you've got to convert 31 other fan bases to a London franchise and get them buying London franchise gear. There's a reason why NFL Europe failed. There's a track record of the NFL. Actually, it fails because it's an occasion, and because it's like lots of teams play in the London series, home and away, rather than as one team playing at home and the other teams being away. It's kind of a draw because every team gets a chance to play in London as the home team. I mean, even the Cleveland Browns played a home game in Wembley, for Christ's sake. So, I don't. The Jacksonville Jaguars can't even draw in their own stadium right now, and they're a team that sucks. They suck just as bad as the Cleveland Browns. They really suck. Why would you want to move a team like Jacksonville that can't win and make the playoffs regularly to London? Major League Baseball, I don't know. I don't know is the answer to that one about Major League Baseball. I couldn't tell you. I'm surprised Major League Baseball were initially going to come here in 2017 and they delayed until 2019. I'm surprised they've taken as long as they have to get games over here, considering that the NHL have played the Belfast Giants in Belfast. I think 2007, I think was the last time they came over here. But they've been coming over to Europe regularly with this international series for a long time. And they first came over in 1938. The NBA has been coming here since the 90s and regularly comes here to play games, and does other games in Europe as well. The NFL since 2007. Major League Baseball taking as long as it has to come into the European market. Bearing in mind its big overseas market is Asia, and No, where were they going to play an outdoor game and why? And really, the NHL. I think the NHL. A lot of fans are getting a bit annoyed with the outdoor games. With the NHL, it is a money making scheme. Fans turn up for them, absolutely, but I think we've got to be a bit careful with trying to overdo it. And again, the logistics. They do the international series in pre-season, and they have 2 or 3 regular season games in Europe. We had last season the Florida Panthers, Winnipeg Jets played 2 games in Finland. We've had some games in the Czech Republic this year. We've had some pre-season games in Switzerland this year with the NHL. I think. Oh yeah, the international player pathway is a joke because why would players like Valentine Holmes go back to the NRL? Why would Jared Hayne go back to the NRL? And why was Christian Wade not made the Buffalo Bills roster? Just putting it out there. I'm just putting that out there. The player pathway with the outdoor games 5 times the ticket cost. I mean, that's just a rip off considering that the crowds are 10 times as big. It's just insane. Anyway, I'm going to leave the stream there. We've gone on to a point now where we've gone to the North American leagues bringing sports to the UK. The NFL will never have a team in London. If they were going to have a team, it should have happened by now. That was the plan. They're 2 years behind schedule on that then. If they were going to have a team in London, they're well overdue for one. It's not going to happen. They asked the Boston Celtics CEO they asked the Boston Celtics CEO about the possibility of having a major league franchise in the UK or in Europe. Okay, because the NHL was considering a European franchise. They asked the Boston Celtics, one of the most successful NBA teams, okay, of all time. They asked their CEO, what are the chances of having a major league team from the US or Canada over here in the UK or in Europe? So overseas, outside of the US and Canada, they went, not a chance in hell. I said, nope, not a chance in hell. It's not going to happen. 0%. That tells you all you need to know. One of the NBA CEOs of a team was interviewed before their game, the season before last, about having a major league franchise from the US Canadian leagues over here in the UK or Europe. They were asked him, what are the chances of having a team in London, for example, or anywhere else in Europe? And he went, 0%. While the league might be giving out all these hints that they want to have a professional team, be it the NFL or NBA or NHL in Europe, doesn't matter if it's London or Europe, and they give all these hints saying, we want a team here, we want a team here. The reality is it's not going to happen. But anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for all your questions. And Jason, I will be seeing you in the office tomorrow about asking about my holiday. So you better be joking about being declined, because if it's declined, I will not be very happy, because I kind of could use a bit of a break and a bit of R&R. But I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for all your questions. A lot of interesting topics, some of them really important topics that really the authorities in sport need to really get a grip on. Sectarianism, racism, homophobia, sexism. But we shall see what happens with all that. I think the players need to go on strike, but I'm not sure they're going to get much sympathy because of the amount of money they're paid. I think they've dug themselves a little hole there by being too greedy, and it's backfiring on them when they actually do need to actually have some action taken. They're not getting the support they should be getting from the fans necessarily. But thank you very much. I thank you for congratulations on the 700 subscribers. It happened very, very quickly. The other day we were on like 670 odd, and it shot up to 700 very, very quickly. I think I've gained 30 subs in like 2 days. I have no idea where they came from. I really don't. I really have no idea where my subscribers, all these new subscribers have come from. But thank you very much for watching, guys. Really appreciate all the questions. I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon. Bosh. Ugh.